So, talked about kites, we've talked about boards. Now what we need to do is look at harnesses and wetsuits. The harness is probably the most important bit of kit you're going to buy. Why? Because it's your power transfer conduit. It's what takes the power from the kite, transfers it through your core, which is typically a very key component of us as humans, and transfers it through your legs into the board and out into the water. Okay, so the harness is probably the most critical part. Again, what I would say, the most important thing with the harness, it needs to be comfortable. Okay, if it's not comfortable, it's going to make your life a misery. So that's the first thing I would be checking for, is the harness comfortable? The second question that I always get is, okay, well, seat or waist? Okay, we in the school use seat harnesses. Before I go down this road, I would say this is going to depend an awful lot on your personal physique, your personal body. Some people find, especially people who've suffered with lower back problems, that one of these two works much better than the other. Okay, that's not for me to say that people with lower back problems should have a seat harness or should have a waist harness. It will depend on you, on where you've got lower back problems and what exactly the lower back problem is. But what I would suggest, if you are struggling with one type of harness, try the other type and you may find it changes everything. A lot of people with lower back problems that I know say, look, I can't ride in, let's say, a waist harness, but when I ride in a seat harness, it actually makes my back better. It strengthens everything up, it pulls it all together and it makes it stronger. So you can often find, just by changing your harness, if you do suffer from lower back problems, that one of them makes it better, one of them will make it worse, and that's fairly obvious straight away which one you should be going for in that case. But let me talk about the actual advantages and disadvantages of each one, so you can also, if this isn't a problem for you, you can make your mind up from there. As I was saying, we in the school exclusively teach beginners on seat harnesses. Why? Well, seat harnesses does two things. The main one that it prevents is because the seat harness sits much lower down on your body, it sits just sort of on your hips, it means that there's a lot more distance that harness hook has got to ride up to crunch into your ribs, which is obviously what we're trying to avoid as a beginner. You don't want that harness hook anywhere near your ribs because that's where we start breaking bones. So it keeps the harness hook nice and down, nice and low. A waist harness sits higher because it sits around your waist on top of your hips, and so will sit that much higher, so it's already very close to your rib cage, so it can do a lot more damage there. The second reason, the major reason why we use them in the school, is we've already said the seat harness sits lower down. So what does that do when I want to depower? Well, it means there's already a massive distance between my harness hook, my chicken loop, and my arms, the bar, so I can depower the kite an awful lot more, which is great when we're teaching smaller people with shorter arms, because it means that they don't have to be doing this to try and depower the kite. Whereas on a waist harness, because it sits that much higher up, and because you have the kite above your head an awful lot, it tends to ride up even higher, even up to your nipples, and you're not getting much depower there compared to a seat harness where your harness hook is maybe a foot lower down. So you get an awful lot more depower on a seat harness. Okay, so this is why we teach on them in the school, because the main problem with waist harness is, we've got the kite above our heads an awful lot, they ride up. As people move to riding and riding at wind, we often suggest they move to a waist harness, even if only temporarily. The reason for this is that basically what we're trying to do is correct their stance. Most people, when it comes to riding, adopt what is called the shitting stance, or what we call the shitting stance. They're crunched down, they're bent over, their bum is sticking out. The main problem with this, apart from it making you look very, very uncool, is that if you imagine if I'm sat in that position, imagine if I'm being pushed from the back. As soon as I get pushed on the back, I fall forward. I've got nothing to throw back to counterbalance against it. So all my weight's already going forward. So as soon as I get a gust of wind, I'm being pulled over the front of the board. If, on the other hand, I'm in the shagging position, i.e. my hips are thrust forward and my head is thrown back off the board, if I get pushed from the back, all I need to do is throw my hips further forward and throw my head back, and I'm counterbalancing that pull. So when the kite gets a gust and pulls me forward, I just need to drop back and I can counterbalance that pull. Now with a waist harness, if you are riding in the shitting position, your harness is going to come up because everything is pulling the harness upwards and it's going to end up around your armpit. So you get instant feedback as to whether you're in the right position or not. If I'm in the shagging position and my hips are thrust forward, the waist harness is almost being held down by the kite. So it's not riding up around my armpits. So I'm forced into this position for comfort's sake, and I get instant feedback on whether I'm in the correct position. This doesn't happen with a seat harness, because obviously with a seat harness, I can be in the shitting position and that harness is still staying locked where it is. So I don't get that feedback to tell me, oh look, you've been stood in the shitting position while you're riding, you've been sticking your bum out basically. So you don't have that instant feedback to push your waist, push your hips forward and throw your head backwards. So this is why we recommend, even if only for a few hours, days, people try a waist harness just to get used to that position, and then if they want, they can go back to a seat harness if they find it more comfortable. I will be honest, most people ride waist harnesses. The major reason for this is nothing to do with performance, it's because it looks cool. Simple as that. Okay, and if that's all you're into guys before, great. If you find that riding a waist harness impairs your performance, that a seat harness is more comfortable, for God's sake go and buy a seat harness. Yeah, it's just not worth it. The one downside I would suggest of a seat harness, which I've certainly found, I know a lot of the male friends of mine have found, is that those straps tend to get very close to fairly delicate parts. And it can cause you every now and again to come off the water with a little bit of a high-pitched voice, which isn't something that's too pleasant for most of us blokes, okay? So that would be my word of warning with the waist harness, with the seat harnesses, sorry, be aware of that. Waist harnesses are also, if you're getting into freestyle and wave riding, often a lot looser, i.e. they spin around your body, which can be a lot more comfortable when you're riding toe side if the harness has slid around and the harness hook is now pointing up this way, as opposed to a fixed rigid harness in the middle where you've got the lines wrapping around your body, which can be a little bit uncomfortable. So again, a waist harness can be designed to move around your body with the kite, which can be a little bit more comfortable, but some people hate it. Some people like the harness as tight as possible so it won't move whatever happens. So again, that's personal preference. But hopefully you can see a little bit of the pros and cons of each, make up your own mind, try a few different types, see what's most comfortable. And what I would even suggest, I actually went back to riding a seat harness the other day for the first time in donkey's years and was really surprised how comfortable it is. It really, just for riding up and down, it's super comfortable. So I would suggest that even though once you're going down this route, chop and change every now and again if you can. It doesn't mean you have to buy a new harness just to try it, just to see, because as your riding style changes, you might find one more comfortable than the other. How do you know if it fits? Well, with a waist harness, it's fairly straightforward. What I'd say you're looking for is, as you tighten the straps up, the webbing is no bigger than about 5 centimeters on each side of the harness. Yeah, because if it's any bigger than that, it means you have too much play in the hook, the harness hook, and it's too likely to come up into your rib cage. Any smaller than that and you've got no room to get fat, which of course we're not going to do because we're kite surfing too much, but just in case it happens, okay? So I'd give yourself about 5 centimeters of play on the webbing lines, just to make sure it's the right fit. But again, going back to this, the important thing is comfort. The harness needs to be comfortable, number one, numero uno. And again, this is why one person can say, this is the best harness I've ever ridden, you've got to get one, try it first, because it might not mold to your body very well, okay? If you're going to buy a waist harness, make sure you're buying one of the kind of the memory foam style harnesses. You get two types. You get the canvas cheap ones, which are cheaper, but don't really mold to your back over time. They just tend to stretch, and you end up with all the tension being forced over a very thin band at your back. The memory foam ones tend to mold with memory to your body, okay? So it's just like wearing a shoe. Over time they become more comfortable and they provide more support, not less. So this is why as well with a harness, I would always buy, with a waist harness, I would always buy new. Because otherwise you're buying a harness that's fitted for someone else's body by default. Seat harness isn't so important because it gets its shape from the actual structure of your body and the straps itself. So those on seat harnesses, the canvas ones are fine. It doesn't need to be the more expensive memory foam. But again, I would spend, this is one of the bits of kit I would really spend money on because it's a point of contact. If it's uncomfortable, if it rubs, if it itches, if it just doesn't feel right, it's going to be a nightmare to ride. And we all know that this area, the core, the lower back and the core, is one of the most important parts of the body, so it's something that you really need to be protecting, really need to be looking after. So that's waist harness, that's harnesses, sorry. Next things that we're going to look at, wetsuits. Two things we want to talk about in wetsuits. One, what do all the numbers mean? So if I've got a 5, 3, 2, what on earth is it talking about? Well, It's talking about the thickness of the wetsuit, of the neoprene in millimeters. So the bigger the number, the thicker the wetsuit, the warmer it's going to be. So a 5-3-2, for example, the 5 is talking about the chest and the back panel. The 3 is talking about the top of the arms and the thighs. The 2 is talking about the lower section of the arms and the calves. If it's just got 2 numbers and it's a long suit, so let's say it's a 4-2, it's 4 on the chest, 2 down the arms and 2 down all the legs. Or it could be a 2-1 and it's a shorty, which again is 2, 1, and then obviously nothing in the lower limbs there. So the thicker the wetsuit is, the higher that number, the warmer it's going to be. Now typically, around Europe, a 5-3-2 or 4-3-2, 4-2, 4-3 is a winter wetsuit. 2-1, 3-2 is a spring stroke summer suit, depending on where you are. Okay, so that's what I'll be aiming for there. Most important thing with a wetsuit is that it fits you. Okay, what you're looking for in the shop, you should be sweating trying to get the damn thing on, because if there's any crinkles, any wrinkles, any bumps and bulges in that wetsuit, it's not fitting properly. And the way a wetsuit works is it holds a layer of water next to your skin. And if there's bumps and bubbles in it, that water's just going to flush through, and the wetsuit is actually going to make, well, not make you colder, but it's certainly not going to be using its full thermal properties to keep you warm. So you want something that is a real struggle to get on the first time. It's also going to stretch. It stretches in the water and it stretches with use. So you want something that in the shop you are literally, I can't get this damn thing up. You just get it on and it fits up without bursting at the seams. That's a good fit. Because then when you get in the water, and I say as you use it over time, it'll be easier and easier to get into, but it will keep you warm. So that's the most important thing as regards a wetsuit. The other thing you want to look at with a wetsuit is the material it's made from. Now there's 2 different types of material generally that wetsuits are made of. There's the kind of the canvas, fabric-y feel of wetsuit, and there's the rubber sort of Batman effect suit. It just looks like rubber, like dark rubber. The difference between these, the canvasy type material is warmer. It's also more resistant to UV and fingernails as you're pulling the thing on. But it's got no wind protection. The wind rips straight through it and takes all the warmth away. The other stuff, the rubber suit, much more resistant against wind, much less resistant against UV and and fingernails. So it gets damaged a lot easier. So that's the toss, and it's not quite so warm in full immersion. So generally for a kite surfing suit, you probably want a bit more of the Batman style suit and a bit less of the canvas. If you're a surfer, where you're going to be immersed in the water and hopefully out of the wind, you want a canvas suit. Okay, but again, the other difference between say a surfing suit, a kite surfing suit, a windsurfing suit, a triathlon suit, is where the flexibility is. Yeah, obviously surfers need a lot of flexibility in the arms because they're going to be paddling more. Kite surfers need it in slightly different places because they've got different movements they're going to be doing. So it's not the end of the world if you buy a surfing suit, but just be aware of the differences between them. So that's the major thing with the wetsuit. Incidentally, what you might see now is these wetsuits that are cut off just below the knee. That is not a fad. That's quite a useful thing actually. A, it looks quite cool, I think. Some people don't, but I quite like it. But B, what it does is on the longer wetsuits, as you're riding along, there's a tendency for water to shoot up your leg. The seal at the bottom of the wetsuit then folds over and the water can't escape. So you get these massive elephant pirate legs at the bottom with the water sloshing around in your legs, which first of all looks really, really uncool. But secondly, it's probably adding about 10 kilos of weight to you. So an extra kite size you need to put up, and it's damn annoying, okay? Because it's sloshing around and you can feel it all the time. 2 simple ways you can cure that. A, get a 3/4 length suit, get one of these suits that cuts off below the knee, or just some Velcro straps. Tie them around the bottom of your legs and it stops this from happening. It stops that seal from folding over and locking the water in. So that's a really, really useful tip for looking cool on the water, okay? Last thing we're going to talk about is line extension. Now we touched on this a little bit in the section on bar and lines, but I just want to talk about how you can actually use this to again tweak your kit that little bit to get some more performance out of it without having to spend too much money. Now, most bars, most bar and lines come as, let's say, 24 meters standard, the last 4 meters of which is an extension. So you can take the lines down to 20 meters. Now we've already said the advantage of shorter lines is the kite responds faster, you reduce the static power and you reduce the potential power. So let's go back to our example we talked about when we talked about buying boards. If you've bought 2 boards, 2 kites. So let's say one day you're out on your 7 meter, You're small board and you're still slightly overpowered. You're on your 25 metre, 24 metre lines. You think, oh, I could really do with a 6 metre kite. 6 metre kite today would be perfect. Cool. Drop back into the beach, knock your lines down to 20 metres and go back out again. And you'll be perfect. You'll be perfectly powered. So again, you're just giving yourself that extra level of ability to tweak your kit for very, very cheap. As we said, this is going to cost you, even if you haven't got them, it's going to cost you maybe 10 euros a line to get them cut in. Really, really cheap, really, really easy to do. So it's well worth doing, just gives you that extra level of tweaking ability to your kit, gets that extra level of performance out of it, and it's not very expensive. So it's an absolute no-brainer to go and do it. Okay?